Hi everyone, I hope you're well. I'm going to read you another story today and have a question for you to answer after the story. But first, I just wanted to talk to you about tomorrow. Do you know what tomorrow is? Why is tomorrow significant? Well, tomorrow is the first day of spring. A new season is starting. So you might begin to notice that the days will get a bit warmer. If you go out for a walk with mum or dad, you might see more flowers starting to bloom. I'm wondering if you know about a flower which is called a daffodil. Does anyone know what colour a daffodil might be? This is a clue. I wore this dress for a reason. Well, I actually have some daffodils here, so I'm going to show you. These beautiful flowers are daffodils. Now their botanical name is Narcissus, and they grow from what we call bulbs, which kind of look a bit like onions, really. So in autumn, when the weather is getting cooler, we plant our daffodil bulbs in the ground and they stay there all throughout winter, nice and snug underground. And then as springtime starts to arrive, we see them come up first as a little green shoot with their leaves, and then eventually there'll be a nice yellow flower as well. Now, these particular daffodils are actually called doubles, which means that they have extra petals than a normal daffodil would have. So that's why they look especially fluffy, beautiful. So the story I'm going to read to you today is about daffodils. Let me see if I can put this somewhere where we can see it. There we go. Okay, this book is called That's Not a Daffodil, and it's by Elizabeth Honey. One day, Mr. Yilmaz from next door called in with a basket of apples and a crumpled paper bag. "What is it?" asked Tom. "It's a daffodil," said Mr. Yilmaz. "That's not a daffodil," said Tom. "That's an onion." "Well, let's plant it and see," said Mr. Yilmaz. So they planted the bulb with the pointy end up on a large round terracotta pot. "There," said Mr. Yilmaz, patting it down. "That will grow into a beautiful daffodil." You can see that they're dressed quite warmly, so it's probably autumn or even the start of winter here. Tom watched the pot, but nothing happened. Nothing, nothing, nothing. And we can see these are different days because he's wearing different clothes. The next time Mr. Yilmaz dropped by, he asked, "How's the daffodil?" "That's not a daffodil," said Tom. "That's a desert." "Then we will make it rain," said Mr. Yilmaz. So they made it rain and put it in the sun. When Mr. Yilmaz brought in a fine bunch of carrots, he asked, "How's the daffodil?" "Don't know," said Tom. "Well, let's have a look," said Mr. Yilmaz. Ooh, look. "Now what do you think?" asked Mr. Yilmaz. "That's not a daffodil," said Tom. "That's a green beak." "So it is," laughed Mr. Yilmaz. From time to time, Tom measured the beak. It was growing, and while Mr. Yilmaz was away in Turkey, the green beak opened up. the daffodil?" asked Mr. Yilmaz when he came home. "That's not a daffodil," said Tom. "That's a hand with 5 flat fingers." "Green fingers," agreed Mr. Yilmaz. "It does look like a hand popping out of the earth." One blustery winter's day, Mr. Yilmaz blew in with a large pumpkin. "How's the daffodil, Tom?" "That's not a daffodil. That's Grandpa's hairs in the wind." Mr. Yilmaz chuckled. "He needs a haircut." It was pouring with rain when Mr. Yilmaz brought in a bucket of lemons. "Ah, now we can see the bud of the daffodil," said Mr. Yilmaz. "That's not a daffodil," said Tom. "That's a wet rocket." "To the moon?" asked Mr. Yilmaz. "To the moon. Do you think it looks like a rocket now?" One day, Mr. Yilmaz brought his grandchildren to play, Layla and little Khan and their big bouncy dog Carabash. They were trying to catch Carabash when he bounded away and knocked the pot. "Ooh ah!" cried little Khan. "Call the plant ambulance," said Layla. "Mr. Yilmaz!" yelled Tom. Mr. Yilmaz helped them pat the soil back in. "Will it still grow?" asked Tom. "I believe so," said Mr. Yilmaz. "The roots have not been disturbed. Now give it a drink, Layla, and put some water in the bird bath too." In a couple of days, the daffodil wasn't floppy anymore. "How's the daffodil after its little bump?" asked Mr. Yilmaz. "It's not a daffodil," said Tom. "That's a street light." Mr. Yilmaz smiled. "Shining yellow. Spring's not far away." Often it's the daffodils growing that tells us when spring is arriving. They're the first sign of spring. When Tom came home from a weekend at his grandma's, he ran to look in the backyard. "Mr. Yilmaz!" cried Tom. "Mr. Yilmaz, ask the question!" "How is the daffodil?" laughed Mr. Yilmaz. "Quick, come and look!" "Oh," said Mr. Yilmaz. "Now, is that a daffodil?" Tom nodded his head. "That is a daffodil, yes." But it's also a trumpet of gold. Daffodils do look a bit like trumpets. So you can see in this daffodil it has less petals than the ones that I showed you, because this is a normal daffodil and the ones I have are doubles. So I need to give you a question for today. I might bring these back down here so we can look at them a bit more. So my question for you today is, can you tell me, and you can write them on the seesaw, 3 things that you learned about daffodils just from this video? Either from what I was telling you and showing you with the daffodils, or what was in the story. What are 3 things that you learned about daffodils today? Give them a little spin so you can see them beautiful. Aren't they lovely? Maybe if you go for a walk around your neighbourhood with your mum or dad or whoever lives with you, maybe you'll see some daffodils popping up. Okay, so I'm going to leave you with that question, boys and girls. And happy spring. First day of spring tomorrow. Hopefully we'll be out of lockdown soon and we can really get out and enjoy it. All right, until next time, bye.